Good morning, everybody. How you doing? Can everybody stretch out a little bit, wake up? I know a lot of us are from San Francisco and it's 5 in the morning or something. I don't even know. Okay, cool. Do we have my slides? Yeah, okay. So a year ago today, whoa, I don't have my speaker notes though. Cool, okay, we're gonna wing this, friends. Okay, great. So a year ago today, my son was born and he made me a parent. Yeah, thank you. And everybody tells you before that happens, oh, it's gonna change all of your priorities, everything's gonna be different, but until it happens, you don't really know. And for me, one way that this manifested was when I went back to work after maternity leave, it was really hard, and it felt like every minute that I was spending working was a minute I wasn't spending with Weston. And that's true, right? There's this just fact of the universe that we have a finite number of minutes, and when you're doing one thing, you're not doing another thing. That's just opportunity cost, right? And I realized that it was just so hard for me to pull myself away from this little gooey, giggly bundle of joy and walk upstairs and shut my office door and sit down at my desk, even though I truly love my job and I love my coworkers. And it got me thinking, how can I make this less hard? And how can I make this less hard for my team? Because as I said, all of us are doing this all the time, right? We're choosing one thing over another at every second. And so that's what I'm here to talk to you about today, sort of my project of trying to help myself and my team find our inspiration and make it just a little bit easier to get excited to go to work every day. So I'm going to back up for a second and introduce myself. I didn't know we were going to have these lovely introductions. You probably don't need this slide, but hi, I'm Brandi. I'm the head of user research and consumer insights at Open Door. And just for a little bit of context, we are a digital platform that helps make buying and selling homes easier. And so the context, I guess, to keep in your head as I'm going through this talk is that we're a tech company based in San Francisco. And I sit alongside a handful of other design leaders reporting to our head of design, who reports to our CEO. So that's sort of the frame that we're working in here. Okay, oh, my speaker notes really would have been good this for them. All right, that's fine. We're gonna do this awkward thing where I ask you to raise your hands. Oh, here, look, they showed up, cool. Oh, but they're from the other slides. Okay, whatever. Raise your hand if you really, truly are motivated and inspired by the goals that you're working on at work. Okay, that's pretty good, actually. All right, raise your hand if you really understand what excellence looks like at the levels beyond you. Fewer, yeah. Raise your hand if you, in the last 6 months, have done a project that you were super jazzed about and it really helped you grow and it was really in line with your real life goals, stuff that you care about. Hey, good job, team. Raise your hand if all of that is true. Yeah, so we're not doing so well there. And if you're a manager, raise your hand if you can confidently say that that's true for everyone on your team. I see no hands. So it's really hard, right? And the reason it's really hard is because a lot of stars have to align in order for us to be able to answer those questions affirmatively. You have to have a really solid, clear, unbiased set of levels and expectations. You have to have amazing senior colleagues and a window into what they're doing. You have to have the time and space and opportunity and support to take on the projects that align with stuff that gets you excited. And you have to have kind of regular, frequent career conversations with your boss, and those sometimes can be pretty awkward, or maybe they fall through the cracks because you've got more pressing stuff to talk about, right? So it's hard. And it's hard for everyone, but I think it's particularly hard for us researchers for reasons that Claudia was just talking about, right? She said, if I'm remembering correctly, that companies typically wait 8 years to hire a researcher. We're late to the party, right? Oftentimes we're using leveling frameworks that were designed for designers or for analytics people. They weren't really designed for us. And often, also related to what she was saying, it's hard because of the place that we sit within organizations, because it's rare to look around and see people who are above kind of the staff level or above the, say, director level. And if you can't see it, you can't be it, right? So once you get to these more senior levels, it's really challenging to really know what to focus on in order to grow. So, what I'd like to share with you today is something that we're designing at Open Door to try to do a little bit better on this hard stuff. And we're tackling it by creating a new system for evaluating, supporting, and inspiring career growth. And I want to put extra emphasis on system because I want us to all start thinking beyond the rubric. That's not like the only thing that we have at our disposal. An extra emphasis on supporting and inspiring, because many of us do have rubrics, not all of us, but we're like generally, from what I've gathered, doing all right on the evaluation front. But in the like truly inspiring and supporting is where we've got room to grow. So today I'm going to walk you through our process, and what I hope you'll take away from this section is like an example of how to use human-centered design and our own research tools, turn them inwards, find our own unmet needs, our own jobs to be done, and figure out how to create solutions that really work for us. And then I'm going to talk about our growth framework, which is kind of a summary of all of the findings that we found throughout this work that I did. And from that, I hope you'll take away just like where to focus in for yourself on where the areas that you might be able to kind of tweak so that you can be more inspired and have your work goals more in alignment with your like actual real life goals. And then I'll talk through our solutions at the end. Cool? Cool. All right. So we're going to start with our process. This probably looks familiar to a lot of you. This is a pretty standard double diamond. We started with a competitive audit, which I use in air quotes. This was pretty light because it turns out it's kind of hard to get other people to give you their career leveling rubrics. If anyone can tell me why this is, I would really like to know. I do not understand why so many people hold this close to their chests, but I can tell you that when we're done with ours, we will publish it so that you can see it. That said, I was able to talk to a lot of generous and brilliant people at lots of companies who helped me out. In case you don't know what I'm talking about, and I know there are places where you don't have a leveling rubric or skills framework, this is the idea. They're at different levels. It's clearly laid out what you are expected to do in different competency areas. Okay, and then we did need-finding internal interviews, and this is where like the really good gooey stuff happened. So I got to talk to about 20 people on my team, and we got to talk to new people and people who'd been there for a while, people who had like kind of spikes in different areas, qualitative, quantitative, try to get a really representative sample of our research team. And then when I did that synthesis, which I did like an actual real life, I'm a researcher synthesis. I used Reduct, by the way. If you guys haven't tried this tool for qualitative synthesis, it's amazing. Check out Reduct. And in addition to, of course, finding the places where we were doing really well and places where we had room to grow, I also identified these areas where people were just kind of confused, and places where things were even a little bit controversial. We weren't all on the same page from like different members of leadership, different ICs. And so I compiled this list of questions for us to talk about and inserted it into our design sprint. If you're not familiar with what a design sprint is, Google the Google Ventures Design Sprint, and you'll get more information about it. But we kind of massaged that framework and took a lot of time to have some pretty serious discussions about some of these big questions that kind of are foundational to having a robust system. There are a lot more than this, and I don't want to spend a ton of time here, so I put them in the a resources section at the bottom of this talk, and I know they're going to send out the slides, so you can have all of them, and I really hope that you use them, because they were incredibly helpful to us. Okay, so we had these hard conversations, and then we went about our fairly regular design sprint ways, identified opportunities and sketched solutions. This is about where we are now. We're creating prototypes and getting feedback and iterating. So I'm not going to talk about these sections too much, but if you have questions, I do have a lot of tips on them from the kind of secondary research that I've done, so find me after. Okay, so that was our process. Good? Great. Okay, now we're going to move on to our growth framework. So let me first orient you to this thing. So the idea is that on the y-axis, we've got the perception of growth, and then we have kind of four main factors that influence how we're feeling. So the more of these things we've got, the more we feel like, yeah, I can grow here. This is fertile soil. There's a path for me. And the fewer of these things we have, we're feeling like stagnant or maybe stuck, okay? And before I show you what these factors are, I want to emphasize that this is our framework for growth, not the framework for growth. This isn't meant to be like all-encompassing, explaining all of career satisfaction and inspiration, but these are the things that our research unearthed, and I hope that you will take this process and do it in your own organization and build on this and then share it back with us and tell us what you learned and what your factors were. That said, I do think a lot of this will generalize based on the secondary research that we did, and so I wanted to share it with you. And guys, I'm using a gardening metaphor about growth because I just couldn't help myself, so, that's how we're gonna roll. Okay, so the first factor that we're gonna talk about is level ground. And the key idea here is that in order, before we do anything else, we have to have clear, non-arbitrary, consistently applied expectations. And so here's some quotes to bring this to life. If something fails, how do we think about the impact of that? If you're working on a failed project, are you going to get promoted? It seems like we have a little bit of luck sneaking in here, right? And if we have any luck or unfairness sneaking into the system, it starts to feel like a place where you can't grow. Okay, great. We can fix that. In my former jobs that were not in tech, performance reviews were a complete black box. I love being able to see the expectations written out and that everyone's aligned on them. This was really interesting and was a really clear theme that the tech industry is doing pretty well as compared to many other industries, and people were just so grateful that we had a career framework at all, and that it was fairly transparent and they understood how they were going to be evaluated, so that's clutch. And then this one, it's a little bit vague sometimes on what medium or large project might entail. Does that depend on the number of stakeholders or business impact or time or all of the above? There aren't any specific examples. And the problem with vagueness, in addition to being vague, is that it can, again, let the perception of unfairness creep in, because it's do I have confidence that everyone's getting kind of measured by the same stick if we're not all kind of aligned on what these terms mean? And another insight that just kept jumping out and jumping out and jumping out was that it's not only about the levels and expectations rubric, it's about kind of all of the norms and decision-making criteria that are around it. And if people don't have clear answers to things, they fill in the blanks. And sometimes they fill in the blanks with stuff that's right, sometimes with stuff that's wrong, and sometimes with stuff that's demotivating. And so I urge you, if you're an individual contributor, reflect and think about what are the assumptions that you are making about how you're being evaluated, what the next steps of your career are, what's available to you in terms of growth, and ask the questions. And if you're a person who's designing these systems, do the work of talking to your people and identifying what their blanks are and fill them in so that we're not operating from this state of uncertainty. Okay, we're going to do a self-assessment as we go in each of these areas. So for level ground, if you're an individual contributor, I would like you to ask yourself these questions. And if you're a manager, I'd like you to ask yourself these questions. As managers, we sometimes forget to do that and just think about the people on our team, but ask them of yourself. And then again, ask yourself if you can answer them for every member of your team. Okay. The next area we're going to focus on is something to stretch towards. This is a fun one. So the key idea here is that we all need concrete next steps towards personally meaningful goals. We are not going to get that feeling of growth unless we have clear next steps and ideally role models whose work we can look up to. So a quote that brings this to life: it can be hard to know exactly what kinds of things you should do next to move up sometimes. Not just at Open Door, but in general. People don't really know how to become a super senior IC. And this was actually one of the things that motivated this project, because becoming a super senior IC is sort of this nebulous, mystical thing. Again, because we don't have a lot of them to look up to outside of maybe some fellows at Google and that sort of thing, right? But in most companies, they don't exist. Another quote, "The lessons from Leaders program you launched is really helpful. To hear Paul's candid take on his career so far, what guides him, and things that he's learned. I would honestly love to see more of that." So this is a notion that being able to just like see into other people's career paths and the decisions that they made and what they're doing is incredibly valuable, and we don't do it enough. It has to feel like you're working towards something that feels true to you. So maybe the word I'm looking for is flexibility. I want to choose my own adventure. And if you think about the way a typical career rubric looks, it's like an Excel, right? There's no delight and discovery. There's no choose your own adventure aspect to it. And that makes it really freaking hard to be inspired and like have those goals that you're working towards to get promoted line up with your life goals. Okay, self-assessment time. You ready? Ask it for yourself. Ask it for your teams. Okay. Next section, space to grow. In order to grow, you need space to grow. And that means you need the time and the opportunity and also encouragement to take on growth projects, which this one kind of surprised me because when I heard this quote, I think it's great. We do have the growth stipend. However, I feel uncomfortable taking time away from my work. Do I really have time to do it, or do I have to do it on my own? When I heard that, I was stunned, honestly, because our leadership team is so supportive of growth, and we are so privileged to have a growth stipend, you know? And so I was surprised that people didn't feel comfortable with it, but it made a lot of sense to me. Our team is just like so invested in the teams that they're working with that it feels selfish to take time for themselves and to kind of say, I can't work on this project at this moment because I have to go to this conference, right? It's challenging. Another quote. The annual team goals are really helpful because they highlight cross-team projects that I might not be able to see the need for. So this is related to opportunity, especially when you get up to the more senior levels. It's often the case that in order to progress, you need to work on stuff that's really wide in scope, that touches teams outside of your own. Well, if you're in this team, how do you know what's going on in this team, right? And it's really hard to identify projects that will help you get to that next level. Okay. Self-assessment time. Okay. The last area we're going to talk about is frequent nurturing. The key idea here is that we can't set it and forget it. Say we've got level ground, we've got mentors to look up to, we've got space, like all this stuff, super. Well, that's not enough. We have to think about it and actively work on it all the time for ourselves and for us managers, for our teams. This quote helps us understand this. Honestly, the most impactful stuff is just like the basic hygiene, the brush your teeth kind of stuff, the weekly one-on-ones with your manager, personal development plans, review cycle. These are just table stakes. To try to initiate those conversations, it always just felt mildly uncomfortable, I think. This was really interesting to me because when you have kind of time set aside for this and it's just like rolling, it works really well. But if it's left to the individual to have to ask for it, you get into that like selfishness thing again, where people feel maybe a little bit slimy asking questions that will might feel self-promoting or that might get in the way of talking about the work, and you've only got so much time with your manager, right? Another quote here. It's fun to compile our year-end review docs and sort of reflect on all that you've accomplished. In all cases, I felt proud, and I'm like, wow, that was a lot of work. It's inspiring to have skill sharing to remind you of things that maybe you're not using every day. It feels fresh, like you're learning a new method or skill. And so the idea here is like, just like we need regular check-ins with our managers, we need like regular ability to look back and see how far we've come and where you're going, and like this fresh air coming in, like new stuff to think about, or else we start to feel stagnant. Okay, last section of the self-assessment. I'm going to call out this question because I really extra like it. When you are assessing the impact of your work, do you frame it in terms that matter to you personally? Are you only thinking about business OKRs? Or are you thinking about things that you actually care about and assessing your own growth? All right, so just to summarize, remind you, we've talked about kind of the different factors that we found that influence whether or not we feel like we can grow in a certain space. We talked about you have to have level ground, something to stretch toward, space to grow, and frequent nurturing. And you can also find this self-assessment in the slides that we're all getting. And I hope you'll use it, and I hope you'll tweak it, and I hope you'll make it better, and I hope you'll share it back with me, because that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use it with my teams and all in our meetings and continue to iterate on it. Okay, so now we're to our solutions, and that went really fast. So as a reminder, these solutions are like prototypes. So they're more gestural than solid. And we're going to keep tweaking them until we get them to work right. Because again, we're using the human-centered design process on ourselves to make sure we get it right. So the first thing that I'm really excited about is a new levels and expectation framework that's flexible enough to be inspiring to everyone. So whether you're a researcher who kind of wants to bend into the design side or almost the product side, or a researcher who wants to lean into mentorship, or maybe in Kim Scott's language, you want to be a rock star and you actually don't really want to grow right now because you got other things to do. But whatever kind of version of a researcher you want to be, we want you to be able to see yourself in that future role at Open Door. A couple of ways that we're going to do this are by kind of throwing out the typical rubric thing and having, in addition to core fundamental skills that we will have because we have to have a level playing field, also have some amplifiers or places where you can spike if you're interested. And this will give us that kind of choose your own adventure sort of thing. So you got to do the regular stuff, but then which of these do you want to be? And we'll also have archetypes that that we hope will paint a picture of future versions of yourself that you can lean into. So you might be able to see in really concrete terms what an innovator would look like. So a super senior IC who leans into a certain set of amplifiers, sort of like choosing your college major or minor. We're also working on a digital growth resource center, which we've got to rename because that sounds hella boring. But it's actually going to be good, and people are actually going to use it. And they're going to use it because we're going to co-create it together, again, using the tools of our trade. And we're going to iterate on it until we get it right. And we're going to have all sorts of things. Of course, we'll have levels and expectations. We'll also have worksheets that help you align with your manager, great personal development plans, answers to what I'm calling infrequently asked questions. So things that everybody has but nobody is asking, and that relate to some of the things that I was telling you we talked about in our kind of confrontation or the challenging discussions up front. And yeah, I'm just really excited about this. Okay, next one is a career council, which also needs to be renamed. But the key idea here is that you'll have a group of fairly senior individual contributors and managers, leadership, whatever, that you can go to, and they're there for you. They've got your back. And they're gonna help you zoom out and identify projects that you might not be able to see because they can see across kind of a larger swath of the organization, help you identify mentors, conferences, classes, whatever you need to get to your goals. Oh, back button, okay. They're also going to just be there to help you if you feel stuck. If you are in a place where you just can't see the future, they're gonna help paint it for you, not for you, with you. And they're also just gonna be there for support and to cheer you on. So I'm pretty pumped to be part of this council. All right, so that's where we are. That's what we've got. Stay tuned. We'll be blogging about this as we go because we really do want to share all of these resources. You can find it on our Medium, and you can find that at design.opendoor.com. So I hope you guys enjoyed the talk. I hope you at least took away a few tools that will help you have better conversations to get you closer to work that you're like actually pumped about. But more than that, I hope you will join me in using the tools of our trade to look inward to help create a future that we're all more excited about for ourselves and for our industry. Uh-oh, went backwards again. Okay, thank you for listening, and I'd also like to thank my collaborators.